In the sweltering summer of 1849, in Wilkinson County, Mississippi, the great cotton baron, Silas McGraw, bought a slave woman for 20 cents. She was disfigured, her face half hidden beneath a faded scarf, her left eye clouded white. The traders mocked her as ruined stock, a burden to feed, a ghost in rags. Silas didn't care. He was a man obsessed with control over his land, his slaves, even death itself. 20 cents was nothing to him, not for the kind of silence her face promised. But the woman, who gave her name only as Ruth, carried more than scars. She carried a truth buried deeper than cotton roots, a secret that had slept beneath the soil for 10 long years. And when she finally spoke her last word, it would unearth the sin that Silas McGraw feared more than any ghost. The name of the man who buried his own brother alive. The auction yard smelled of sweat, iron, and heat. Dust hung in the air, swirling around the wooden platform where human lives were priced and measured. Men in waistcoats fanned themselves lazily as the trader shouted numbers that rose and fell like the buzz of flies. Strong back. Can pick 100 pounds a day. $40. 45. Silas McGraw stood at the edge of the crowd, silver-tipped cane tapping against the dirt. His boots were polished, clean despite the grime. He was a man who demanded order even here, among the chaos of flesh for sale. He didn't come to buy. His own plantation already had 200 working hands. But when the trader dragged out the woman in rags, something in Silas's sharp gray eyes flickered. "This one," the trader laughed, "ain't worth the cloth she's wearin'. Look at her face, poor thing scared the devil himself." The crowd chuckled. The woman stood still. She didn't flinch, didn't bow her head. The left side of her face was a ruined scar tissue curling from her temple to her jaw, an eye milky and dead. Her other eye, dark as wet soil, watched everything. "Who'll start me at 10 cents? No one answered. 5? The silence thickened. Even the flies seemed to pause. Silas lifted his hand. 20. The trader blinked. 20 cents? A fair price for someone no one else wants. The laughter came again, uneasy this time. Silas tossed a coin onto the platform. The trader pocketed it quickly, muttering something about charity. The woman didn't move as Silas turned and gestured for her to follow. She did, silent and steady, her bare feet padding over the dust. The ride back to McGraw Plantation was long. The sun burned low and red, staining the cotton fields gold. Silas didn't speak, and Ruth didn't ask questions. She sat in the wagon bed, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze on the horizon. When they reached the plantation gates, the overseer, Mr. Halpern, came striding out. "Lord, what's that thing you brought back, sir? Ain't she near useless?" Silas dismounted slowly. "We'll see what she's good for," Halpern sneered, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "Can't pick, can't breed. I'd sooner bury her than feed her." Ruth turned her head slightly. The cloudy eye caught the last rays of sunlight. "Then it's a good thing," she said softly, "that you don't do the burying." The overseer froze. Silas's cane struck the ground once. "Enough," he said sharply. "Put her in the wash house. She'll tend the fire and scrub the linens. And mind your tongue." Halpern grumbled, but he did as told. That night, Ruth washed herself in the trough behind the quarters. The water turned brown with dust and blood. As she scrubbed the dirt from her arms, faint marks appeared, circular scars along her wrists and throat, old burns that told stories no one had asked to hear. From the shadows, the other slaves watched. One of the women, a broad-shouldered field hand named Liza, approached carefully. "You best keep your head down," she whispered. "Massa McGraw don't take kindly to broken things." Ruth wrung out her rag. "Broken things see what the whole ones overlook." Liza frowned. "You talk strange." "I been taught by strange people," Ruth replied. Then she smiled, a small, cracked thing that didn't reach her good eye. "But I know this place, better'n they think." Liza studied her for a moment, then backed away. "You from here?" Ruth didn't answer. She just looked toward the mansion at the top of the hill, the grand white house, where Silas McGraw lived alone, since his brother's death 10 years past. The house where the soil behind the stables had never quite settled flat. Inside the mansion, Silas stood by the window with a glass of bourbon. His reflection shimmered faintly in the glass, a proud, aging man with sharp features and colder eyes. He could still smell the river mud, even after all these years. Could still remember the night the argument turned violent, the sound of his brother's voice choking into silence. He had told everyone his brother, Asa, died in a carriage accident, but sometimes, in the quiet before dawn, he thought he heard knocking from under the ground. He drank deep, shaking the thought away. Below, near the quarters, the new woman sat alone by the fire. Her disfigured face glowed in the flickering light, her head tilted slightly as if listening to something the wind carried. 20 cents, Silas muttered. And even that feels too much. But Ruth smiled faintly at the night. The sound that reached her wasn't wind. It was the low, distant rhythm of the earth, a pulse, a heartbeat, calling her back to what she had come to do. The plantation didn't know it yet, but she was no ordinary slave. She was a messenger, and she had come for the truth that refused to stay buried. The first week passed quietly, but not peacefully. Ruth worked in silence, her movements deliberate, graceful even when burdened by the heavy pails of boiling water or piles of soiled linen. The other slaves avoided her at first, whispering that she was cursed. At night, when the others lay asleep, she would sit by the dying embers of the washhouse fire and hum. It was a low tune, almost like a prayer, slow, mournful, and strangely familiar. The sound floated through the still air, slipping between the trees and up toward the big house. Inside his study, Silas McGraw would wake each time it reached him. He could never tell if it was a dream or something more tangible, something alive. The melody seemed to carry words he couldn't quite make out, but they reminded him of his mother, of a tune she used to sing when Asa was still alive. One night, he snapped, "Who's singing that damn tune?" He roared from the balcony. Down below, Ruth lifted her head from the wash basin. Her good eye caught his glare through the moonlight. "It's just a song to keep the dead from wandering, sir," she said softly. Silas felt his throat tighten. "Keep them from wandering?" "Yes," she said, voice calm, "'cause the ones buried wrong tend to lose their way." The words struck him like a slap. Before he could respond, she turned back to her washing, humming again. The next morning, the plantation felt different. The air was heavier. The workers whispered that snakes had crept into the cotton rows overnight, more than they'd ever seen. A mule refused to move, eyes rolling white as if it sensed something unseen. When Halpern, the overseer, mentioned it to Silas, the master only frowned. "Snakes don't bother me, superstitions do." But that night, when the wind shifted through the shutters, he could swear he heard something knocking from beneath the floorboards, a soft, rhythmic sound like fingernails against wood. He rose from bed, grabbed his pistol, and walked to the parlor. The noise stopped. Only Ruth was awake, tending the hearth. Her scarf had slipped, revealing the twisted flesh that crossed her cheek. She didn't flinch when he entered. "You walk the house at night?" he asked sharply. "Sometimes." "Why?" Her voice was gentle, almost sympathetic. "'Cause I hear someone else walking, too." Silas's heart stuttered. "What did you say?" Ruth tilted her head. "You think I'm blind, sir. But I see what's restless. I hear what the earth don't forget." End quote. He gripped the pistol tighter. "Careful what you say." She met his eyes, her gaze unwavering. "Careful what you bury." The next day, Halpern stormed into the washhouse. "You think you clever, don't you?" he hissed, slamming a hand against the wall beside her head. "Whisperin' nonsense, singing devil songs, making the boss uneasy. I can fix that real quick." Ruth didn't move. Her calmness unnerved him. "Touch me," she said quietly, "and the same dirt that took his brother will take you." Halpern froze. His lips parted, but no words came. He stepped back, fear flashing through his eyes. How you know about that?" Ruth only smiled. "The dead talk in their own ways. You just don't listen." Halpern fled, muttering curses, his face pale. That evening, Silas noticed Halpern drinking more than usual. "What's wrong with you?" he demanded. Halpern swallowed hard. "Sir, that woman, she knows things. About your brother." Silas's eyes turned to ice. "My brother's been dead 10 years. Halpern nodded quickly. I know, sir. But she said, enough. The words snapped like a whip. If I hear one more ghost story out of you, I'll have you whipped instead. You understand me? Halpern nodded again, trembling. But in his heart, he knew he'd seen something unnatural in that woman's gaze. Later that night, Silas sat alone in his study. The whiskey burned his throat, but it couldn't drown the memory creeping back that night long ago when he and Asa argued by the river. You think you own everything, Asa had shouted. Even Ma's grave, even God himself. And you think love makes you righteous? Silas spat back. You'd throw away everything for a slave woman? You'd shame this family for filth? Asa's fist flew. They grappled, rolling in the mud until Silas grabbed a stone. The strike wasn't meant to kill, but when Asa stopped moving, the world went silent. He buried him behind the stables before dawn, told everyone the river took him. And now, the woman he'd bought for 20 cents spoke of that same dirt as if she had dug it herself. Days passed, and Ruth's presence began to unsettle everyone. The slaves whispered that she could heal burns with a touch, that she talked to shadows. One boy claimed he saw her kneeling near the stables at midnight, pressing her palm to the ground and murmuring softly, I found you. Silas forbade anyone from speaking to her, but he couldn't ignore the pull the way she seemed to know things about the plantation that no stranger should. One afternoon, he confronted her again. Who are you? He demanded. Where did you come from? Ruth folded a sheet and placed it neatly in the basket. I come from where the truth don't rot, even when it's buried. He slammed his cane against the floor. Enough riddles! She looked up at him then, her voice low and steady. You buried your sin deep, but not deep enough. The earth's been whispering ever since, and it sent me to listen. He stared at her, words dying in his throat. Why? He managed finally. Why you? Ruth's gaze softened. 'Cause I once loved the man you buried. Silas's hand trembled. The world tilted. No, he whispered. You're lying. Her good eye glimmered in the dim light. You remember her name, don't you? Ruth. She used to sit by the river with him. He told her he'd come back for her. Silas felt the blood drain from his face. That Ruth had been gone for 10 years, vanished after Asa's death. He looked at the woman before him, scarred, broken, and yet somehow familiar. Impossible, he breathed. Ruth stepped closer, her voice like wind through dead leaves. Not impossible, Silas. Just unfinished. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, and the first drops of rain began to fall soft at first, then heavy, as if the heavens themselves had begun to dig. The truth, long buried, was rising. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. It poured like the sky itself wanted to wash the McGraw plantation clean. The dirt roads turned to rivers, and the air hung heavy with the scent of mud and decay. The cotton fields sagged beneath the weight of the storm, and the workers murmured that the earth was bleeding out its secrets. Inside the big house, Silas McGraw hadn't slept. His hair was unkempt, his eyes hollow, and his cane clattered against the floorboards like an unsteady drumbeat as he paced. The memory of Ruth's words replayed in his mind. You buried your sin deep, but not deep enough. He had buried Asa behind the stables, yes, but no one had ever found the grave. He'd done it alone, no witnesses, no proof. And yet, she knew. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that one-eyed woman staring through him, not with hatred, but with something worse, recognition. On the 4th night, the rain slowed to a drizzle. The slaves stayed inside their quarters, whispering that the storm had been called by Ruth. In the wash house, Ruth sat by the embers again, her good eye reflecting the dying light. Her scar glistened like a riverbed. In her hands, she held a small cloth bundle, something she had unearthed from beneath the floor earlier that day. Inside the bundle was a button, tarnished but familiar brass, carved with the McGraw crest, Asa's coat button. She rubbed it between her fingers, humming softly. You hear me now, Asa? She whispered. You can rest soon. I promise you that. Behind her, a shadow appeared in the doorway. It was Mary Ellen, one of the kitchen girls. Miss Ruth, she said nervously, the master's asking for you. Ruth looked up. What for? Mary Ellen swallowed. He's out by the stables. The night was black, moonless, and wet. The ground squelched beneath Ruth's bare feet as she made her way toward the back of the property. Silas stood there, lantern in one hand, shovel in the other. His face gleamed with rain and whiskey. "You said I buried wrong," he said when she reached him. "Then tell me where to dig." Ruth looked at the muddy ground, her voice barely above the wind. "You already know where." He raised the lantern higher. "You think I believe your nonsense? That my brother's talking through you?" "He's dead." She met his eyes calmly. "Then why can't you sleep?" The silence between them crackled like lightning. Without another word, Silas drove the shovel into the wet earth. The blade sank deep with a wet, sucking sound. He dug furiously, mud splattering his boots and face. Ruth watched, her expression unreadable, until the shovel struck something solid, a dull thud beneath the soil. He froze. His breath came shallow. Slowly, he knelt and brushed away the dirt with trembling hands. A fragment of bone emerged. Then another. He staggered back, face white. "No, no, no." Ruth stepped forward, lantern light flickering across her scarred face. "You left him to rot. Alone." Silas's voice cracked. "You don't understand, he was gonna ruin us. Ruin me. He turned his back on this family for a slave girl." Her voice broke for the first time. "That girl was me." The world tilted again. The rain hissed around them, steam rising from the lantern's flame. "I begged him not to fight you," she whispered. "He said you were his brother, that blood meant something. But blood meant nothing to you." Silas's hand tightened around the shovel. "He betrayed everything our father built. And you betrayed God himself," Ruth snapped, stepping closer. "You buried your brother like a dog. You took my child from me before it could even breathe." He flinched. "What are you?" She placed a hand over her stomach, eyes glistening. "You didn't just kill Asa that night, Silas. You killed our future." Thunder cracked above them. The lantern guttered, then went out, plunging them into darkness. For a long time, neither moved. Then Ruth spoke again, her voice low, trembling not with fear but with fury contained for too long. "You can still make it right," she said. "Dig him up proper. Give him peace." Silas's hands shook. "And if I don't?" Ruth stepped back, and something shifted in her tone, almost like a prayer. "Then the ground'll take what it's owed." The next morning, Halpern found Silas sitting beside the half-dug grave, staring into the mud. His clothes were soaked, his eyes bloodshot. "Sir, what the hell happened out here?" Silas didn't answer. He just muttered, "She's gone." "Who?" "Ruth." Halpern frowned. "No, sir, she ain't. I saw her near the well this mornin' hummin' that same tune again." Silas's face drained of color. He turned toward the house, stumbled inside, and went straight to his study. On his desk lay the brass button, the same one Asa used to wear. But now, it was clean, polished. And beside it was a scrap of linen with words stitched in crooked thread. "I found him." By evening, Silas had boarded himself inside the big house. He ordered Halpern to keep everyone away. The slaves whispered that the master had gone mad. They said he spoke to the walls, shouting at voices no one else could hear. And every night, the same sound echoed through the house, the soft, steady tapping beneath the floorboards. Sometimes, the tapping came from directly under his chair, sometimes from under his bed, and sometimes it came from behind the walls. In the wash-house, Ruth sat by the fire again, the tune on her lips quieter now, almost a lullaby. "Rest now, Asa," she murmured. He's startin' to remember. Outside, the rain began again, gentle and rhythmic as if the earth itself was keeping time with her song. But deep beneath the stables, the disturbed earth had begun to shift. A crack split the mud where Silas had dug, and something pale glimmered faintly in the dark, the shape of a hand, long buried, now reaching upward. And somewhere in the night, a voice, low and broken, whispered back to Ruth's song. The dead were listening. The storm that night was not like the others. It rolled across the sky like cannon fire, shaking the windows of the McGraw estate. The dogs wouldn't stop howling. The horses kicked their stalls until blood streaked their hides. Even the swamp seemed to breathe heavier, a slow, wet pulse rising from the earth itself. Silas McGraw sat slumped in his study, a bottle of rye at his elbow and the brass button on his desk glinting in the candlelight. His face looked older than his years, drawn and gray. He hadn't eaten in days. The servants avoided his room. Now even Halpern refused to enter after the last time, when Silas had thrown a lamp at him for asking if he was all right. He wasn't. He could still hear it, the tapping, sometimes faint, sometimes near, sometimes from beneath the floorboards, sometimes from inside the walls. 3 knocks, pause, then 2 more. He had counted it once. It always came in 5s. At dawn, Ruth appeared at the doorstep of the big house. She carried a basket of clean linens as if nothing had changed, as if she hadn't stood by her lover's grave the night before. Her one good eye glistened in the soft morning light. Calm, unreadable. Halpern stepped in front of her. "The master don't want you here," he said, lowering his voice. Ruth looked past him toward the window of the study. "He may not want me," she said softly, "but he needs me." Halpern's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, but something in her tone made him step aside. She walked into the house like someone crossing the threshold of a church, head high, step steady. When she reached the study, Silas was staring into the fire. He didn't turn when she entered. "You brought me the devil himself, Ruth," he rasped. She placed the basket down gently. "No, Silas," she said. "You dug him up yourself." He turned then, his eyes wild. "You think I don't know what this is? You've cursed me. You and that grave." Ruth shook her head slowly. "The curse was already here. It's just been waiting for you to listen." He slammed his hand down on the desk. "Enough of your riddles. Tell me what you want." Her gaze softened. "I want you to tell the truth." "The truth?" He laughed, a cracked, bitter sound. "What good's the truth to the dead?" "It ain't for the dead," she said. "It's for the living." That night, the tapping changed. It started again around midnight, 5 soft raps beneath the floorboards. Then silence. Then, from the wall behind his bed, a dragging sound, like something heavy moving through the plaster. Silas sat up, drenched in sweat, his heart slamming in his chest. He lit a candle and pressed his ear against the wall. Silence. Then knock. He stumbled back, the candle trembling in his hand. The sound came again, louder now, deliberate. Not from under the floor this time. From inside the wall itself. "Stop it," he screamed. "Leave me be." But the knocking didn't stop. It followed him down the hall, echoing from room to room, until it became a rhythm, the same rhythm as Ruth's humming. By the time he reached the parlor, the walls were alive with sound. The portraits shook against the plaster. The chandelier swayed. The tapping grew to pounding. Silas clapped his hands over his ears and fell to his knees. "What do you want from me?" And then, the pounding stopped. From the hallway behind him, a voice answered, soft, wet, and low. "Say his name." Silas turned slowly. The hall was dark, the air thick and cold. His candle flickered, and there, at the far end of the corridor, stood a shadow, a man's shape, dripping mud. Silas's throat closed. "Asa." The shadow took 1 step forward, then another. Mud slid down its face, revealing something pale beneath, not bone, not flesh, but something in between. Its lips didn't move when it spoke again. "You buried me." Silas backed away, trembling. "It wasn't supposed to be like that," he whispered. You were going to leave me behind. You and her. You killed me," the thing said. "And you lied about it." Ruth's voice came from behind him now. "He didn't just kill you, Asa. He killed the child, too." Silas spun around. Ruth stood in the doorway, her face illuminated by the candlelight, calm and terrible. "Tell him, Silas," she said. "Tell him what you did." "I didn't know," Silas choked. "I didn't know she was—" "Say it," Ruth screamed. "I didn't know she was pregnant." The house fell silent. Even the thunder seemed to hold its breath. Then Asa's shadow spoke again, voice softer now, almost gentle. "Now you do." The next morning, the plantation was still. The slaves found Silas McGraw sitting upright in his chair, eyes open, face frozen in a look of pure terror. The doctor said his heart had stopped. When they tried to move him, the chair wouldn't budge. The legs had sunk deep into the floorboards as if something below had been holding him there. Ruth stood at the doorway, watching in silence. When Halpern asked what to do with the body, she said, "Bury him with his brother, side by side. The earth will know what to do." And that's exactly what they did. That night, Ruth went back to the washhouse. The rain had stopped, and the swamp was still. She took the brass button from her pocket and placed it on the window ledge. "It's done now, Asa," she whispered. "You can rest." But as she turned to leave, she noticed something on the floor, muddy footprints. 2 sets, one small, one large. The larger led to the doorway. The smaller stopped right beside her chair. Ruth's breath caught in her throat. She looked down. There, in the dirt, was the faint imprint of a tiny hand. She closed her eyes and began to hum again the same tune Asa had taught her years ago, before everything went wrong. Outside, the swamp sighed, the water rippling like something exhaling beneath the surface. The dead were quiet. For now, 3 days after Silas McGraw was buried beside his brother, the plantation fell under a hush thicker than fog. No laughter came from the fields. No singing rose from the slave quarters. Even the wind seemed cautious when it passed through the moss-draped trees. The McGraw estate had become a house of ghosts. Halpern now ran what little remained of the operation, though his face had gone pale and hollow. He refused to step foot near the stables where the brothers were laid to rest. He swore the soil there, breathed, that on some nights you could hear whispering from under the mud. The workers avoided it too, they said. Every bird that landed near that grave flew away lopsided, wings slick with something black. Ruth, meanwhile, had returned to her quiet duties in the washhouse. No one questioned her presence anymore. The same people who once mocked her scar and called her witch woman now crossed themselves when she walked by. But inside, Ruth was not at peace. When she closed her eye at night, she saw the shape of Asa's face again, not the monstrous, mud-covered vision from the night of reckoning, but the man he'd been before Silas's rage ended him, his laugh, his songs, the way his rough hands had held her belly once and said, "He'll have your eyes, Ruth, the good one and the bad." But that dream never lived. Silas had buried both father and unborn child in one cruel act, and though Asa's spirit was now free, Ruth could still feel something restless beneath the soil. One afternoon, Halpern came to her door. He looked worn, like a man haunted by his own heartbeat. "Ruth," he said, voice trembling, "I've been seeing things." She set aside the bucket she was scrubbing. "What kind of things?" "In the swamp, near the big oak by the creek. Thought it was a trick of the light at first, but there's someone out there. Looks like the master, the dead one." Ruth studied him, her scar pulling tight as she frowned. "You sure it wasn't a shadow?" Halpern shook his head. "No, ma'am. I saw his face. He was smiling." A chill crawled up Ruth's spine. She stood, wiped her hands on her apron, and said simply, "Show me." They walked out past the stables, past the sagging fence line, into the wet whisper of the swamp. The air smelled of rot and rain. The trees leaned over them like eavesdroppers, draped in veils of moss. When they reached the creek, Ruth stopped. There, half sunken in the water, was a shape. At first, it looked like a tree root or a piece of driftwood, but then it shifted and the light caught it. A human figure. Ruth stepped forward, heart pounding. The shape rose slightly with the ripple of the water, pale skin, tattered clothes. Its face was gone, eaten away by mud and time, but in its hand was something bright. A brass button. Ruth fell to her knees. "Asa," she whispered. Halpern stumbled back, voice shaking. "We need to leave it be." But Ruth didn't move. She reached into the water, her fingers trembling as she took the button from the corpse's grasp. The water went still the moment she did. Then the sound came faint, almost like breathing. From beneath the creek, it wasn't the wind. It was something deeper, older. Ruth stood, dripping and pale. "He's still bound here," she murmured. "The swamp won't let go." Halpern looked terrified. "What do you mean?" She turned to him, her one eye gleaming like wet amber. "Asa's spirit ain't angry no more, but the swamp's taken to feedin' on anger now. It's learned the taste of it." That night, Ruth prepared for what she called the unbinding. She lit candles in a circle by the water's edge and sprinkled ashes from Silas's burned ledger book into the swamp. She hummed the old song again, the one Asa used to play on his harmonica, and dropped the brass button into the black water. The surface rippled once, then again, and from the center of the circle, bubbles began to rise, slow and thick, as if the swamp itself was breathing. "Let them rest," Ruth whispered. "Both of them. Let this land stop taking blood." A sudden wind whipped across the swamp, extinguishing the candles. In the darkness, Ruth heard a voice, not Silas, not Asa, but something deeper. It said only one word, "Done." Then the water went still again. When dawn came, the plantation woke to silence. The birds had returned. The air was clean. Even the slaves dared to laugh a little again. Halpern found Ruth sitting by the creek, eyes closed, her hands folded in her lap. For the first time since the storm, she was smiling. "Is it over?" he asked softly. She nodded. "For them, yes. For me, it never will be." He wanted to ask what she meant, but when he stepped closer, he saw something strange, a line of small footprints in the mud beside her, child-sized, leading from the water to where she sat, then vanishing into nothing. Ruth opened her eye and saw him staring. "He came to say goodbye," she murmured. Halpern crossed himself. "Lord have mercy." Ruth looked out at the glimmering swamp, her voice calm. "He already did." That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, a final storm rolled through, gentle this time, like a blessing. Rain tapped against the roofs, washing away the last of the red clay that clung to the graves, and when lightning flashed across the sky, two figures could be seen standing in the field, hand in hand, one tall, one small, fading with the rain. The swamp sighed once more, the kind of sigh that comes after a promise is finally kept. By morning, the McGraw plantation was quiet again. The earth, for the first time in years, looked at peace, and in the wash-house, where Ruth once hummed her sorrow into the fire, there was only silence, except for the faint, distant sound of a harmonica, playing softly through the mist. Years rolled by, soft and unmarked, until the McGraw plantation was little more than memory. The house leaned and buckled, its roof swallowed by ivy and time. The cotton fields turned wild, the stalks giving way to tall grass and creeping vines. Only the swamp remained unchanged still, watchful, breathing with secrets older than the trees themselves. The new owners who came after the war tried to reclaim the land, but none stayed long. Tools rusted overnight, animals vanished without a trace. On certain mornings, mist rose so thick that men swore they saw figures moving through it, one tall, one stooped, their outlines fading whenever sunlight broke the fog. Locals began calling the place Ruth's Bend, after the woman whose name survived even when the McGraws didn't. They said she'd been a slave with a scarred face and a heart too stubborn to break. Some called her a witch, others a healer. But everyone agreed on one thing: the swamp listened to her. A traveling preacher once tried to bless the land. He stood on the old veranda, Bible in hand, his voice trembling as he spoke. Midway through his sermon, a gust of wind tore the pages from his book and scattered them into the water. He left before nightfall and never returned. Years later, children from nearby farms would dare each other to run to the edge of the swamp and call Ruth's name. Most came back laughing, but a few swore they heard a woman humming just beyond the trees, a low tune that echoed off the water. They said the song could calm even the fiercest storms. In 1890, an old field hand named Isaiah Carter, grandson of one of the McGraw slaves, came back to the property. He carried a satchel of seeds and a harmonica. Folks thought him mad when he said he wanted to make peace with the land. Isaiah rebuilt the wash house first. He cleared the moss, patched the roof, and found the stone hearth still standing. On the mantel, beneath decades of soot, he found a single brass button. He picked it up, turned it over, and smiled faintly. "You never left, did you?" he whispered. That night, he sat by the swamp and played a tune slow, mournful, but kind. As the notes drifted across the water, the trees seemed to lean closer. Fireflies gathered like sparks from another world. And when he stopped playing, The air itself answered one long, trembling note that seemed to come from beneath the water. Isaiah chuckled, eyes wet. "Still got your song, Asa, still got it." He stayed until his death 2 years later. Locals found him sitting by the swamp, harmonica in his lap, smile on his face. They buried him beside the creek. On the night after his funeral, a storm rolled through, gentle as a sigh. When the clouds cleared, the swamp glowed faintly blue as if moonlight had sunk beneath its surface. By the turn of the century, the story of Ruth and Asa had become legend. Some said Ruth's spirit watched over runaways during the war, guiding them through the swamp to safety. Others claimed she still walked the waters, carrying a lantern for lost souls. But there were darker tellings too, that the swamp chose her because she was the only one brave enough to listen to it, that every cruelty buried there, every lash, every scream had fed its hunger until Ruth made a pact. She would carry its pain so it would no longer devour the living. And in return, it would protect the broken. No one knows which version is true. But even now, travelers who pass near Ruth's Bend say the same thing. When the night is still and the mist hangs low, they can hear two voices in the dark, a woman's hum and a man's harmonica, twined together like the roots beneath the water. In the modern day, there's nothing left of the McGraw estate but fragments. A crumbled foundation, a rusted gate, a stone chimney half swallowed by vines. The air smells of moss and rain. The swamp, wide and endless, stretches in all directions. Every few years, a historian or thrill-seeker will visit, drawn by the legend. They bring cameras, recorders, notebooks. Most leave with nothing but mosquito bites and foggy photos. But one researcher, a young woman named Lena Dorsey, descendant of freed slaves, wrote something strange in her journal after visiting. "When I stood by the creek, I felt warmth on my shoulder. Not the sun, something softer. I heard a sound, like breathing, then a low tune. The same one my grandmother used to hum when she worked in the fields. I think Ruth is still here, watching, protecting, listening." She left a small brass button at the water's edge before departing. The next morning, the button was gone, and in its place was a fresh wildflower, blooming from the mud. As dusk falls over Ruth's Bend, the swamp comes alive again. The trees whisper, the air thickens. Somewhere, faint and far off, a harmonica begins to play. And if you listen closely past the frogs, past the rustle of cattails, you'll hear a woman's voice hum softly in reply. Not sorrowful anymore, not angry, just at peace. The water ripples once, reflecting the last light of the dying sun, and then stills, silent and eternal, keeping the oath it made long ago. The swamp remembers. The swamp forgives. The swamp keeps its own. When the state decided to run a new road through the edge of the old McGraw land, most folks in town didn't think twice. The swamp had been left alone for more than 100 years, forgotten, avoided, swallowed by legend. Bulldozers came, humming like insects under a gray morning sky, and the men running them laughed when someone mentioned Ruth's Bend. "Just stories," one said, lighting a cigarette. "Ain't nothing down there but mud and ghosts." He wasn't wrong, but he wasn't right either. On the third day of work, their machines hit something hard beneath the muck. Not rock, not metal. When they cleared the water away, they found what looked like a small stone wall, overgrown and sunken deep. The foreman ordered the work halted and called the county. That's how Dr. Lena Dorsey found herself standing at the edge of the swamp again, the same place she had visited 10 years before, when she'd left that brass button at the water's edge. Now, older and weary from too many sleepless nights in libraries and archives, she watched the mist curl around her boots. The air carried that same smell, wet wood, salt, and something faintly sweet. "Looks like a foundation," one of the workers said. "Old cabin, maybe." Lena stepped closer. "No," she murmured. "That's the wash house." The man blinked. "The what?" She didn't answer. She just stared at the stones, her pulse quickening. She remembered the story her grandmother had told about Ruth, about the swamp that swallowed pain and whispered mercy. She'd always thought it was a parable, something meant to make sense of suffering. But now, seeing the foundation rise from the mud, it felt like the land itself was remembering. When the crew left for the day, Lena stayed behind. The evening turned amber. Frogs began their low songs, and dragonflies drifted like spirits. She knelt beside the exposed stones, tracing the moss with her fingertips. Something sharp pricked her skin, a rusted nail, half buried. She pulled it free and found it tied to a small scrap of cloth. It was old. Impossibly old. The cloth bore a single, faded stitch, a cross. Lena's throat tightened. Her grandmother's quilt had the same pattern. A gust of wind rustled the reeds. Then she heard it faint, familiar, impossible. A woman's hum. She froze. It came again, closer this time, low and warm, like a lullaby sung from beneath the earth. Lena turned toward the swamp, eyes wide. The surface of the water rippled, though nothing had touched it. Ruth. She whispered before she could stop herself. The hum faltered, then shifted into words, carried by the wind. He ain't lost. He just forgot the way home. Lena's knees went weak. Who? She asked aloud. No answer, just the hush of the swamp. Then she saw it. A flicker of blue light beneath the water, faint as breath, moving slowly between the reeds. It hovered for a moment near the edge, then sank out of sight. Lena felt tears slide down her cheeks. She wasn't sure why. The swamp was alive, not with evil, not with fear, but with memory. Every name, every cry, every promise. Still there, still breathing. She stayed until the sun was gone and the moon turned the water silver. When she finally rose, her knees stiff and her palms muddy, she whispered, "I'll protect it. I promise." And the wind sighed, like a voice answering from far away. Then we'll remember you too. A month later, the construction project was canceled. The county declared the land historically significant after Lena submitted her findings, though she never told them about the voice. She wrote her report like an academic would, possible remains of an antebellum washhouse, evidence of 19th century settlement. But in her personal journal, she wrote something else. The swamp doesn't bury history. It keeps it breathing until someone listens. She started a foundation in Ruth's name, the Bend Project, dedicated to recovering the stories of enslaved women lost to time. Every week, she returned to the site, planting flowers where the old washhouse had stood. Wild irises, the same color as twilight. Sometimes she brought her students. Sometimes she came alone. And always, before leaving, she set a small object by the water. A button, a ring, a scrap of cloth, something that had once been loved. No one else heard the humming. But once, just once, one of her students swore he saw a woman's reflection in the swamp water. Not ghostly gentle, smiling. One evening, Lena came late, long after sunset. Fireflies floated over the reeds like embers. She knelt, touched the water, and closed her eyes. "I kept my promise," she said softly. "They know your name now." A soft ripple touched her fingers, warm, like breath. And though she told no one, Lena swore she heard it again. The sound of a harmonica drifting faintly across the swamp, a melody older than memory, carrying the voice of a woman who had once refused to break. As Lena turned to leave, the moonlight caught the water's surface, and for just a heartbeat, she saw two figures standing in the mist. One tall, one stooped, hand in hand, watching her go. Then the fog swallowed them, and the swamp went still. But if you walk there now when the air is heavy and the night is kind, you might hear it too. A hum and a tune, a promise and a memory. Ruth's Bend still breathes, and it remembers every soul brave enough to listen.